What is your childhood memory that you thought was normal, but realized it was traumatic later in your life? When I was 11, my parents helped a battered wife out of an abusive situation. Her husband was a bad guy but was still roaming free. Nobody knew where he was. And he had made serious threats against my family. My mom ran me through the steps if he were to break in. I would get my younger siblings in the closet with me, she would run, and draw him out and away from the house to a predetermined location. Once they left, I would take the shotgun out of the closet and shoot him. I was groomed to kill a man at 11. Never had to, but totally prepared. When it was my weekend with my dad, I would be dropped off at people's houses. I thought it was fun because it was all so different and got to meet new people. When I got older, I realized it was neglect and he was palming me off while he went elsewhere. My big brother used to give me treats, M&Ms, brownies, cheese and bread. Only years later did I realize he was sneaking me food because we were not being fed. I am healthy and functional today because a 3-year-old stole food from me. My cousin's extremely religious mother would practice rapture drills with her. This consisted of her mom bursting into her room at like 3 a.m., banging pots and pans together, and screaming, "It's the rapture is happening, will you be saved?" She would then make my cousin confess her sins to her, and then tell her that she would be going to hell for her sins. It terrified her, but she thought that this was a normal thing that all families, mothers do until adulthood. When she casually mentioned it in conversation, and the whole room went silent, her now husband had to explain to her that no, that is not normal. Being 16, and finding out that I was the only one of my peers in that class who was still being beaten by their parents regularly. The oldest anyone was the last time they were physically punished was 10 years younger than I was. When I was in the 2nd grade, my older sister came into the bathroom while I was taking a bath to play with my toys with me. I didn't find out until later. It was because my father was having a stroke from drinking too much, and was making sure I didn't finish taking a bath before the paramedics arrived. My sister used to chase me around with a knife when I didn't do as I was told. For the longest time, I thought that's what everyone just did. In year 5, after getting dressed for pay, my teacher would come in and do an underwear competition where we'd run up in our undies and pose. The best underwear would get a high five from the teacher, then we could continue getting changed. In 2nd grade, my best friend and his new best friend threw me to the garage floor, covered in dog piss and excrement. Then they stuck the dog on me and taunted me as it chased me around the garage. They kept opening the door and calling for me to come inside, and then shut it when I got close. I ran around that garage for 10 minutes, trying not to get mauled, before a parent came and found me. My repressive mind told me, 4 years, that it was a story I should laugh about. This question reminds me of that Redditor whose mom made him have a butt plug in at all times, in fear of the devil doing butt stuff or something. The mom got busted when he had to use the bathroom during school, and asked the teacher to help remove his poop plug, or whatever he called it as a kid. Was truly a ducked up story in a similar AskReddit thread. My parents criticized almost everything, especially my appearance. I cut my hair too short. I looked too fat in a certain dress, 'cause I bought the wrong size apparently, things like that. My grades were too bad. I hang out with the wrong people. I will never get a boyfriend if I don't change my looks, attitude. They always said they have to tell me these things 'cause otherwise I will never know how to be a normal adult. I thought they were right. Now I realize that they kept me from becoming a confident person. And I always feel inferior, weak and stupid, whatever I do. They also said they just want to prepare me for the real tough world out there, but no one ever insulted me as much as my parents did with their remarks. My older sister used to play our Disney read-along tapes to my younger brother and I, whilst guiding us through the words in the books. She taught us to read this way. I didn't realize till years later that she was using the tapes to cover the sound of our parents fighting downstairs. It saddens me that she never got to have a childhood, go into the church instead of the hospital, because God would heal my wounds, including a back problem that is now permanent. When I was in kindergarten, they would make us kneel in a corner on some wood piece that was utterly painful for every time we hurt each other or cursed, which happened a lot apparently. And as soon as I got to elementary school, I asked the teacher the first time I was in trouble where I should go kneel. They took attention to that, and long story short, they called the police on our old kindergarten, and it's now closed since 2006. When I was about 10, my mother had to leave the country for work for almost a year. So she left me to live with her longtime boyfriend. Every night he'd come home drunk, which I thought was hilarious. He'd come into my room, sit on my bed, touch me, especially on the butt, tell me how much I looked like my mother, and try to pull my sheets off. I'd just pretend to sleep. I got annoyed that he kept waking me up. So I started locking my door at night. He broke off the lock and kept doing it. He also once threw a plate at me for giggling at lunch. I never thought of telling my mom about this, because I thought it was normal. I thought that whenever a kid got home late, it was normal for them to be locked outside for the night. Also thought an appropriate response to not doing your chores was to be locked in a closet without food. My younger siblings never got this treatment. I just thought I was an extra awful child. My mom used to give me enemas when I misbehaved. I didn't realize until I made a joke about it during my first semester of college, and everyone looked at me in stunned silence that it was not a normal punishment. My mom leaving me at different places, with different people for months at a time. Or when we would be driving, I remember there would be times where she would tell me about the school she was going to take me to and that I would live there. I remember her describing the horses they had, and how much I would love it. She never ended up taking me there, but would always talk about it like it was some magical place. Found out from my uncle years later it was an orphanage. Only reason she didn't end up taking me is because he threatened to kill her if she did. My mother used to let me skip school a lot to take me to the hospital to see my older sister. We'd have hospital campouts where I'd sleep in the hospital bed with my sister, and she'd sleep in the recliner chair provided for parents. It's now that I realize she'd do that because everyone, doctors, social workers, even friends and family, told her she needed to give me as much good memories with my sister as possible before she died. Surprisingly, that's not the traumatic memory. On those hospital campouts, she used to make me memorize a nursery rhyme. She'd sing it to me, then make me sing it back to her over and over. It was to the tune of Hickory Dickory Clock, because I used to watch Play School a lot. So it was one I loved, but one that wouldn't come up in school. So there was no risk of teachers asking us to play it on recorders, then wondering why I was singing the wrong lyrics. She drilled it into my head so heavily that I still remember the lyrics. The first verse was about my dad, that he was abusive and that I couldn't be placed with him. The second verse was about my godmother, her name and her phone number, that she had documents to prove the abuse, and that she will take me in. I realize now that my father was severely abusive to my mother, and my mother was constantly trying to prepare me in case he killed her, whether it looked like an accident or not. She needed me to be able to tell the police officers that he was abusive, that my godmother's number is Z's, that she has evidence and will take me in. I learned the nursery rhyme when I was 4. I guess it was the only way she could ensure a 4-year-old would memorize information like that. One time my dad threw a temper tantrum and threw a plate full of food at the ceiling because my mom hadn't gotten the right sauce. I thought it was funny at the time, but looking back, that's an awful way for an adult to act. Seeing my dad's body after he died in a plane crash, I was 5. Thought it was normal growing up, and now that I have a daughter, all I can think of is, why would you want your young child to see a effed up dead body of their father? Went to pick up my uncle at a crack house when I was like 11. People sprawled out everywhere. Some lady was on the couch sleeping naked. Me and my cousins were just snickering cause we got to see boobies. My ex-stepdad shot me almost point blank with a pellet gun. The same night, he tricked me into stepping on the hot remains of a firework. He laughed and laughed like it was hilarious as I was sobbing. Still got the pellet gun scar. Mom would tell me to play with my brother because she has to talk to the neighbor. Neighbor comes over and goes straight to the bedroom. My mom closes the door. I am a child and I think nothing of it. It kept going on for a while till my dad comes home early. I remember lots of screaming and the dude jumping out of the window. As a kid, I used to brag about being able to sleep for over 24 hours straight to friends or teachers, or really whoever would listen. I was mid-sentence mentioning it as a freshman in college when I realized my divorced father was drugging preschool me with cold meds, so I'd sleep through his weekends of custody with me. It really ducked up my sense of reality for a while. When I was 5, I was home alone. I found a box of matches and brought them to my room. I burned a piece of paper on my carpeted floor, creating a scorch mark in my room. Fortunately, there wasn't a fire. When my dad and stepmom got home, they had put me in the bathtub for a bath. My stepmom was enraged. She grabbed a lighter from her pocket, then she grabbed my hand. She placed my hand onto an ignited flame for roughly 5 to 10 seconds. Memory is hazy, but I remember many things, but a few examples. Fathers don't teach their 10-year-old daughters French kissing, that they had to renovate the floors because they couldn't get our blood out, that social services took my brother out, but didn't even ask about me, never calling our parents mom and dad, but by their first names, getting sedatives when we were crying too loud or had nightmares. My mom taught me how to swim by pretty much drowning me in the ocean. Every time I'd cry, she'd go deeper in the water and just let me go, leaving me to go under until I basically learned how to swim by saving myself from drowning. I always thought I was just being a brat because I cried, so it was justified, but it caused me to refuse to ever go into deep water, and I had to reteach myself how to swim for pleasure in my mid-20s. My mom passed away when I was 5 from breast cancer. When we were at the service at our church, my dad, sisters, and I were walked to the front pew, and everyone was being so nice. When the pastor started talking, everyone around me started crying, especially my dad. I remember wondering why they're all crying, and when it didn't stop, I just joined in. I didn't get why we were crying, and thought my mom was just at the hospital resting like she had been so many times before. There used to be this man that would live at my house when I was about 3 to 5, named Skip, and whenever I would walk by him, he would ask me, "You want to see my sexy leg?" To which I would always respond yes enthusiastically. He would then roll up his pant leg really high and rub his thigh up and down while dog whistling. At the time, I thought it was hilarious. Well, turns out he was my dad's meth dealer who needed a place to stay because he was being investigated for murder.